The connection between Qui-Gon Jinn and the Force had always been unique. He did not blindly follow the dogmas of the Jedi Order, preferring to trust in the living Force, that energy that pulsed through every living being. His death at the hands of Darth Maul on Naboo did not signify the end of his existence, but rather a profound transformation. Through teachings received from an ancient shaman of the Wills, Qui-Gon completed a spiritual journey that few Jedi knew. He maintained his consciousness after death, although initially he could not manifest himself visually as a complete ghost. His voice, however, crossed the veil between worlds, reaching those sensitive to the Force. It was thus that he began to communicate with Grand Master Yoda on Coruscant. Sharing secrets about immortality through the Force, Yoda received the teachings of Qui-Gon with reverence and curiosity. The old master realized that there was much more beyond dissolution into the cosmic force that all Jedi expected. The technique of the Force Ghost was complex, requiring total detachment and profound understanding of the nature of existence. Qui-Gon patiently explained how he had learned to retain his identity even after leaving the physical body. Yoda practiced in silence, meditating on these truths for years. He knew that this knowledge would be crucial in the dark times that were approaching. Qui-Gon's wisdom was not just about surviving death, but about serving the Force even after it. Anakin Skywalker arrived at Yoda's quarters with a heavy heart and eyes marked by insomnia. The nightmares about Padme dying in childbirth tormented him night after night, leaving him desperate and confused. He knelt before the Grand Master, his hands trembling slightly as he recounted the terrible visions that haunted him. Yoda closed his eyes, reaching into the Force to sense the inner turmoil of the young Jedi Knight. There was fear there, deep fear that could lead him down dangerous paths. The Master perceived something more, however, a whisper in the Force that suggested an unusual solution. The presence of Qui-Gon Jinn hovered nearby, as if the deceased Master was waiting for this exact moment. "Young Skywalker, feel in the Force I can, that someone wishes to speak with you," said Yoda, his voice soft but laden with meaning. Anakin raised his gaze, confusion evident in his features. Yoda continued, explaining that Qui-Gon Jinn, the master who had discovered him on Tatooine and believed in his potential when no one else did, remained connected to the Force in a singular way. The old Jedi described how Qui-Gon had learned to maintain his consciousness beyond death. Anakin felt a wave of emotion upon hearing Qui-Gon's name, remembering that wise man who had seen in him more than a slave. Perhaps he could offer the counsel that Anakin so desperately needed in that moment of crisis. Yoda instructed Anakin on the technique of communicating with Force ghosts. It was not simple, it required deep meditation and total openness of spirit. The young Jedi would need to quiet his turbulent mind, calm the ocean of emotions that consumed him. Qui-Gon could only reach him if Anakin created inner space for this connection. The Grand Master explained that anxiety and fear acted as barriers, preventing the voice of the deceased master from being heard. Anakin should find peace within himself, even if for brief moments. Yoda guided him to meditate in the meditation halls of the temple, where the Force flowed with particular intensity. There, away from the distractions and turmoil of Coruscant, Anakin could try to establish contact. "Discovered by him you were. Believe in you when no one else believed. He did," said Yoda, placing his small hand on Anakin's knee. The young Jedi nodded, feeling a mixture of hope and apprehension. He rose slowly, determined to follow the Grand Master's instructions. Yoda watched Anakin depart, his ancient eyes laden with concern and cautious hope. The Master knew that Qui-Gon could be exactly the influence that Anakin needed at that critical moment. The Force moved in mysterious ways, and perhaps this was the chance to prevent the shadows from consuming the Chosen One. Yoda remained seated, entering deep meditation to facilitate the connection between the living and the dead, between the student and the Master who had first believed in his destiny. Anakin sat in the center of the meditation hall, legs crossed and hands resting on his knees. The room was shrouded in penumbra, illuminated only by the soft light that filtered through the high windows. He closed his eyes and tried to do what Yoda had taught, seeking the inner silence necessary to hear beyond the physical world. But his mind did not cooperate, jumping from one worry to another like a wild animal in a cage. Images of Padme dying invaded his thoughts repeatedly, her cry of pain echoing in his imagination. Fear grabbed him with invisible claws, squeezing his chest until he could barely breathe. He tried to push away these visions, but they returned with redoubled force, each time more vivid and terrifying. Hours passed without any progress. Anakin opened his eyes, frustration burning in his chest like living fire. He stood up abruptly, pacing from one side of the room to the other. How could he calm his mind when everything he loved was threatened? The technique seemed impossible, a cruel trick that only served to remind him of his inadequacy. He thought about giving up completely, about seeking other solutions to save Padme. Perhaps there was knowledge that the Jedi Order was hiding, secrets that Palpatine had insinuated he knew. Anakin punched the wall softly, fighting against the despair that threatened to engulf him. He wanted to scream, release all the anguish he carried within himself, but he knew that would solve nothing. Finally, exhausted physically and emotionally, Anakin let himself fall to the floor. He gave up trying to control his thoughts, gave up forcing meditation. His mind wandered freely, taking him back to memories of Tatooine, to the first time he had seen Qui-Gon Jinn. He remembered the Master's gentle gaze, the conviction in his voice when he told everyone that Anakin was special. Qui-Gon had never doubted him, even when the Council showed skepticism. That man had given everything to free him from slavery, risked his life in the pod race and later in the battle against the Sith. Anakin felt tears burning in his eyes as he recalled how Qui-Gon had died before seeing him become a Jedi. The weight of that memory brought a strange tranquility, as if the pain connected him to something greater than himself. It was in this moment of complete surrender that he heard it. The voice was distant, almost imperceptible, but unmistakably familiar. "Don't give up, Anakin," it murmured through the Force, carrying that same gentleness he remembered. Anakin's heart raced, his eyes widening. Qui-Gon was there, somehow, reaching him across the impossible chasm between life and death. The voice disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, but left a trail of warmth and hope. Anakin realized his mistake, understood that he had been trying to force something that could only happen through surrender. He didn't need to conquer this connection through pure effort, but rather allow it to happen naturally. The realization filled him with new determination and, for the first time in days, he felt there was a path ahead. Anakin returned to the meditation position, but this time with a completely different approach. He did not fight against his thoughts or emotions. He simply observed them pass like clouds in the sky. When fear arose, he acknowledged it without judgment and let it go. When images of Padme appeared, he accepted them as part of himself, but did not cling to them. Gradually, his mind began to quiet, not by force, but by understanding. He felt the Force flow through him differently, not as something to be controlled or manipulated, but as a river in which he could simply float. The room around him seemed to expand, the walls dissolving into soft light. Anakin realized he was more deeply connected to the Force than he had ever been, diving into layers of existence he didn't know existed. The presence of Qui-Gon Jinn became stronger, more tangible. Anakin could feel the Master around him, not as a ghost in the common sense, but as a living and loving consciousness. The voice spoke again, this time clearer and closer. "You did it, my young friend," said Qui-Gon, pride evident in his tone. Anakin kept his eyes closed, tears flowing freely down his face as he absorbed the reality of the moment. He had succeeded, overcome his own limitations to achieve something extraordinary. The connection was established, and now he could receive the guidance he so desperately needed. For the first time since the nightmares began, Anakin felt that perhaps there was hope, that perhaps he was not as lost as he feared. Qui-Gon's presence enveloped him like a protective mantle, promising to guide him through the darkness that awaited him. "Master Qui-Gon," Anakin whispered, his voice choked with emotion. The presence of the deceased Jedi remained strong around him, filling the meditation room with a serene and comforting energy. Anakin felt like a child again, seeking the wisdom of the one who had first believed in his potential. He opened his heart completely, allowing Qui-Gon to feel all his fear, all his anguish regarding the dreams about Padme. The words came out in a torrent, describing every terrible detail of the visions that tormented him night after night. Qui-Gon listened in silence, his presence radiating understanding and compassion. When Anakin finally finished, exhausted by the emotional catharsis, the Master spoke with that calm voice he remembered so well. "Anakin, your dreams are not simply visions of the inevitable future." Qui-Gon began, his words flowing through the Force. He explained that the Force showed possibilities, not absolute certainties. The future was always in motion, shaped by the choices we make in the present. The fear that Anakin felt was not a weakness, but rather a natural part of loving deeply. The mistake was in allowing that fear to control him, in letting it dictate his actions. Qui-Gon acknowledged that the Jedi Order had failed to teach its members about emotions in a balanced way, preferring suppression instead of understanding. But Anakin needed to understand that reacting to fear with desperation would only create the conditions for his visions to become reality. The path to saving Padme was not in seeking power at any cost, but in trusting the Force and the people around him. The Master also suggested that Anakin share his concerns with Obi-Wan, his brother in everything but blood. Keeping everything inside himself was corroding Anakin from within, transforming his fear into something poisonous that could destroy him. Qui-Gon then spoke about the dark side of the Force, warning Anakin about how it fed on negative emotions. Fear, anger, hatred, all these feelings were doors through which darkness could enter. He perceived that someone was trying to manipulate Anakin, whispering promises of power and forbidden knowledge. "Who has been speaking with you about ways to prevent death?" asked Qui-Gon, his voice laden with concern. Anakin hesitated, but finally admitted that Chancellor Palpatine had insinuated knowing secrets that could save those he loved. Qui-Gon felt a chill in the Force upon hearing that name. He instructed Anakin to be very careful with the Chancellor's words, for not everything that seemed good really was. There was danger hidden in easy promises, especially those that demanded abandoning the principles by which someone had lived. "The love you feel for Padme is not wrong, Anakin," Qui-Gon continued, surprising the young Jedi. The Order preached detachment, but Qui-Gon had always questioned this rigid doctrine. Love could be a source of tremendous strength when channeled correctly. The problem was not loving, but allowing the fear of losing those we love to transform us into something we wouldn't recognize. Anakin needed to find balance between his love for Padme and his duty as a Jedi, between protecting her and trusting in the will of the Force. Qui-Gon reminded him that he was the chosen one, destined to bring balance to the Force. This destiny could not be fulfilled if he lost himself in the darkness of despair. The journey ahead would be difficult, but Anakin was not alone. He had friends, he had Padme, and now he had again the guidance of Qui-Gon through the Force. "Trust yourself, Anakin, and trust in the Force," said Qui-Gon, his presence beginning to weaken slightly. Maintaining the connection required great effort, even for a master with his abilities. He promised that he would continue watching over Anakin, that he would be there whenever he needed guidance. But the young Jedi needed to make his own decisions, make his own choices. The future of Padme, the future of the galaxy, everything depended on the actions that Anakin would take in the following days. Qui-Gon expressed his unshakable faith in Anakin's good heart, in the goodness that had always existed in that boy from Tatooine. That goodness was still there, only temporarily obscured by fear and doubt. If Anakin could rediscover it, if he could act from love instead of fear, then he would fulfill his true destiny and save not only Padme, but countless lives throughout the galaxy. Anakin was completely alone in the Jedi Council chamber, the silence weighing on him like a suffocating blanket. The large panoramic windows offered a spectacular view of Coruscant at night, millions of lights shining like terrestrial stars across the infinite metropolis. But Anakin could not appreciate the beauty. His mind was too occupied with internal turmoil. Master Windu had ordered him to remain there while he and other masters went to arrest Chancellor Palpatine. Revealed as the Sith Lord Darth Sidious they had been hunting for years. The revelation had been shocking, shaking the foundations of Anakin's reality. Palpatine, his mentor and friend for so many years, was the enemy who had destroyed so many lives. Each second seemed like torturous eternity, the silence of the room exponentially amplifying the turmoil in his turbulent mind. Anakin paced from one side to the other incessantly, his hands trembling visibly as he thought about everything happening in the depths of the governmental district. Palpatine had specifically promised that only he could save Padme from death, that he knew the ancient power to prevent those we love from dying. If the Jedi killed him during the arrest, that precious knowledge would be lost forever, buried with him. The seductive voice of the Chancellor echoed persistently in his head, an invasive presence he could not completely silence. The words were soft but insistent, reminding him of everything at stake, of everything he would lose if he did not act. Anakin gripped his head with his hands firmly, trying desperately to silence the internal whispers that pressed him to act immediately. His mind was divided in half, each part fighting violently for supremacy. He knew he should trust the Jedi Masters, knew that Palpatine was dangerous and evil. But what if there was a chance, even small, that the Chancellor really could save Padme? Could he risk losing this unique opportunity? These questions circulated endlessly in his mind without resolution. Palpatine's voice whispered through the Force, infiltrating his consciousness like poison. The young Jedi shook his head violently, but the words kept coming in persistent waves. You will lose your only chance to save Padme and your children. The Jedi are the true enemies of democracy and freedom. They fear your superior power and want to control you. Go now, before it's too late to save everything you love. Anakin felt himself divided in half like torn paper, each part of himself pulling in opposite directions with equal force. An internal voice screamed that he needed to go immediately, that he needed to prevent the Jedi from destroying his last hope of saving Padme. Another voice, weaker and more distant, reminded him of the teachings of Qui-Gon received just hours ago, of the solemn warnings about the dark side and its empty promises. He slowly approached the door of the chamber, his hand hovering uncertainly over the control to open it. One simple movement would suffice and he could run to save the Chancellor from summary execution. But something kept him immobile, an inexplicable inner resistance he did not fully understand. It was as if invisible roots held him to the ground, preventing him from taking that crucial step. It was then that the temperature of the room changed subtly, a familiar and warm presence manifesting directly at his side. Anakin turned abruptly, his heart racing, and saw the translucent and shining figure of Qui-Gon Jinn materializing before him. The Jedi Master glowed with a soft bluish and ethereal light, his features serene and his deep eyes full of compassion. Master Qui-Gon! Anakin exclaimed with relief and surprise, his heart leaping between renewed hope and profound confusion. The solid presence of the Force ghost brought momentary but powerful clarity to his turbulent and divided mind. Qui-Gon looked at him with that paternal and understanding expression that Anakin remembered so vividly from when he was just a frightened boy. "Anakin, I am here as I promised," said the Master, his voice echoing both through the physical air and through the Force itself simultaneously. The manifestation was significantly more complete than during their previous communication in the meditation room. This was the direct result of Qui-Gon's continuous and intensive training in the world beyond life. He had come exactly when Anakin needed him most, when the young Jedi was at the dangerous edge of making an irreversible decision that would change everything forever. "Do not listen to his lies, Anakin," Qui-Gon said firmly, directly countering the poisonous voices flooding the young man's mind. He explained urgently that Palpatine was the true source of the darkness that had poisoned the galaxy for entire decades, the silent architect of all the suffering and war that had devastated countless worlds. The tempting promises of the Chancellor were completely empty, elaborate tricks carefully crafted to lure Anakin into permanent darkness. There was no real power to prevent death in the dark side, only progressive corruption and inexorable loss of everything that made someone human. "Padme will die anyway if you follow this dark path," Qui-Gon warned, his voice laden with desperate urgency. The dark side distorted everything it touched in insidious ways, transforming pure love into sickly possessiveness, protection into cruel tyranny, passion into destructive fury. Anakin recoiled physically, horrified and nauseated. This was the truth that Palpatine carefully hid, the real destiny that awaited at the end of that dark path. But still, Anakin still struggled against the magnetic pull of the Chancellor's promises. The fear for Padme's life was so intense that it clouded his judgment, making it difficult to think clearly. The voices collided in his mind like opposite and violent storms, each demanding his complete loyalty. Palpatine insisted fervently that he needed to act immediately without hesitation, that each lost second brought Padme inexorably closer to the promised death. Qui-Gon asked calmly and patiently that he trust in the eternal force, that he remain faithful to the principles by which he had lived all his conscious life. "You are the chosen one, Anakin," said Qui-Gon with absolute conviction, placing his translucent spectral hand on the young Jedi's shoulder. The sensation was extraordinarily strange, neither totally physical nor completely ethereal, but profoundly comforting in ways that defied description. "Your grandiose destiny is not to serve the destructive dark side, but to destroy it completely. Trust me. Trust Obi-Wan, who has always been at your side. Trust in the fundamental goodness that has always existed in you since childhood." Anakin looked directly into the translucent eyes of the Master, seeing there the same unshakable faith that Qui-Gon had demonstrated years ago on Tatooine when he had bet everything on a slave boy. That man had died believing in him without reservations, sacrificed his precious life to ensure that Anakin would be properly trained as a Jedi. Could he really betray that deep faith now, at the most crucial moment of his existence? Could he really spit on the sacrifice that Qui-Gon had made? Tears flowed freely down Anakin's face as the inner battle reached its devastating climax. Every fiber of his being was being tested. Every principle he claimed to value was being examined under extreme pressure. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity compressed into minutes, Anakin took a deliberate step backward, definitively moving away from the door and the temptation it represented. "I will stay here as I was ordered," he whispered, his voice broken and hoarse but laden with newly discovered determination. Palpatine's invasive presence in his mind roared in impotent fury, attempting a last desperate assault to control him and force him to act. The voices screamed threats, promising that he would regret this decision for the rest of his miserable life. But Qui-Gon remained firmly at his side, his own luminous presence in the Force creating a powerful protective shield around Anakin. The young Jedi felt the Chancellor's voices finally begin to fade gradually, losing their hypnotic power over him like smoke dispersing in the wind. Mental clarity returned slowly, as if a dense fog was finally lifting. Anakin could think again without that constant whisper poisoning every thought. Minutes that seemed like hours passed in contemplative silence. Anakin remained in the chamber, Qui-Gon at his side as a silent guardian, until finally Master Windu returned. The Master entered the chamber with a grave but satisfied expression. Windu reported that Palpatine had been confronted in his office and, after categorically refusing to surrender peacefully and attacking the Masters with terrifying Sith power, had been defeated in combat. The Sith Lord was dead, his threat to the galaxy finally eliminated after decades of secret manipulation. The war could finally end now that the true enemy had been revealed and defeated. Anakin felt a complex mixture of emotions, profound relief mixed with sadness for the man he thought he knew. He looked at Qui-Gon, who smiled with paternal approval and pride before beginning to slowly fade. "You made the right choice, Anakin. You are truly the chosen one of the prophecies," said the Master, his voice echoing as his form dissolved. "And Padme will live, for you chose true love instead of selfish fear." With these final words of comfort, the ghost disappeared completely, leaving Anakin alone. But for the first time in weeks, he did not feel truly alone. The next day, Obi-Wan approached, placing a real and solid hand on his shoulder. "You stayed, my young Padawan," said Obi-Wan with evident pride. "You did what was right even when it must have been incredibly difficult." Master Windu looked at Anakin with new appreciation, something the young Jedi had rarely seen in those critical eyes. "Skywalker, you resisted the dark side when it called you directly. In doing so, you fulfilled the prophecy. Palpatine was the imbalance in the Force, and through your choices, you ensured his destruction." Yoda approached slowly, leaning on his cane, his ancient eyes shining with wisdom and satisfaction. Truly the chosen one you are, young Skywalker. Balance the Force you did by choosing the light when the darkness called you. Proud of you, Qui-Gon would be. Proud all of us are. Ki-Adi-Mundi nodded in solemn agreement, acknowledging the historical moment that had just occurred. Anakin felt tears of relief and emotional exhaustion burning in his eyes. He had been so close to the edge, so close to falling into the abyss that Palpatine had carefully prepared for him. But with Qui-Gon's help, with the faith of his masters and friends, he had chosen differently. He had faced his moment of supreme decision, looked directly into the abyss, and chosen to step back. Chosen the light, chosen to trust, chosen true love instead of possessive fear. The prophecy was fulfilled not through power or violence, but through a moral choice at the crucial moment. Anakin Skywalker was truly the chosen one, not because he destroyed the Sith with his own hands, but because he chose not to become one of them when everything inside him screamed to do exactly that.